to lead our Tech Talk, please help me welcome Lisa Granite-Steen. She is Chief Content Officer, Adweek.
We're going in?
Lisa?
Oh.
Come on down.
Hi.
Yes. All right. And then you heard Mary Lou talk about our panelists, but I'll give them a proper introduction. We have Sandra Lopez, VP GM CMO, Microsoft Board of Director, Junior Achievement USA, and Advisory Board for SIGA America. We also have Elise Saul, CEO and Partner, Underdog Advisory, as well as Elizabeth O'Brien, WW Sports and Entertainment Partnership. So take it away.
Thank you. Thank you all for having us. And I will introduce everyone in just a sec, or let them introduce themselves. Just to start off, sports and technology is supposed to be a $30 billion business by 2034. We're talking about wearables, metaverse, the cloud, big data, AI. There's so much opportunity. And these women are on the cutting edge. And we're going to talk about how they built up their careers and where all the opportunities are. So with that, I'll have Elise and then Sandra and Elizabeth introduce themselves, explain a little bit about their roles and how they got into sports tech.
Oh, okay. So Elise Saul. I actually am wearing two hats here. One is I am CEO and partner of Underdog Advisory, which is part of Underdog Venture Team. And I'll tell you about that role in a second. I'm also the chair of WIST. You just saw Mary Lou McFarland, who did an introduction, and WIST is Women in Sports Tech, and we exist as a nonprofit to help change the ratio, increase the value, the prominence, and the validation of women and people of color having a seat at the table in the world of sports and sports technology. The role that I have in advisory is I work in sports tech. I help sports tech founders, mostly women and people of color, help to get their value proposition exactly right so that they can then go out into the marketplace, they can raise funds, as well as connect with sports properties. Because sports properties now, even though they are the last bastion of verticals that have converted into digital transformation, if you will, they are now finally understanding that the underpinnings of their success is focused on technologies. And technologies 10 and 15 and even 20 years ago were created for other verticals. And then as sports properties realized, oh my gosh, I want some of that, they were just lifted and shifted, which was very clunky. And so it didn't always work. And today there are technologies that are built specifically for sports pain points. And this is what is greasing the skids for sports properties to be able to become digitally advanced, be able to find new ways to be able to reach their consumers, find new ways to drive fan acquisition, particularly as the audience for sports changes. So that's the role that I play at Underdog, and my passion point is always raising the bar for women and people of color, because that is what drives the sports ecosystem today and moving forward.
Hi, good afternoon. And first I have to start off with, it's a Female Women in Sports Summit. Happy International Women's Day. So credit to all of you guys, and to the male allies, thank you for being here. And in particular, Dan, you're back there. You've been such a great contributor to my success, so thank you for your sponsorship. I've started in tech since I was born in terms of recent college grad, and I started in technology. Ironically, my career was really in fashion, and what I realized is I was really curious about sociology and psychology. And quickly, a year into the fashion industry, I realized that you can't really make a difference unless you're a creative director, and I was not a creative director, I was a business person. And I was able to take the science that I was learning around psychology in undergrad, as well as taking some engineering courses, to realize that I wanted to pivot in the world of technology, because I wanted to understand how technology was going to change society. And I embarked on that journey, and I worked for many different companies, which was a gift because I was exposed to different facets of leaboth the good and bad of the tech industry. And over time, I landed at a wonderful company by the name of Intel. And I always like to reflect that it gave me many opportunities to grow and evolve and understand who I could become. Whether I had the opportunity to go live in China, overseas, come back, and I was a marketer by trade, if you think about fashion, psychology, sociology, but I never knew that I had this inherent gift of being able to run businesses from a profitable standpoint. And in order for Intel to survive, they had to enter these new businesses. And so my first journey as my CEO asked me to help participate in establishing the wearable business, which we may talk a little bit about. And we had a successful run, and we had a shift in strategy, and my senior leadership said, the success that you did in wearable, we want you to do that in sports. And to Alyssa's point is that we realized that there were two verticals left standing in terms of technology adoption. One was retail and fashion, and the other one was sports. And what Intel has done a really good job is bringing ecosystems along. We can bring the technology and the innovation and the best engineers in the world, coupled with the smarts of the people in the sports industry to better assess how can we make sports accessible to all. I mean, that's the technology connects all of us. And why does it have to be, the haves and have-nots? I mean, I was just looking at to go to the Super Bowl. A lot of people and families that wanted to go just couldn't. And that's wrong. Or what about like in China, having lived there, they're big NBA fans and WNBA fans, and they'll never have the ability to travel overseas to watch a game. So being able to transport yourself and feel like you're literally on the court is transformative. And so COVID in itself illustrated the power of technology to try the best to keep sports going, and accelerated many innovations. I, over time, decided to evolve out of Intel and now at Microsoft. And Microsoft has many strategic partnerships across many leagues. And more than anything, it's such an honor to work with the CEO by the name of Satya, who has put integrity, kind of very akin to sports and SIGA, in the forefront in terms of bringing technology that's accessible to all. And so I look forward to talking about what Microsoft's doing in the sports industry. And then obviously, I always like to say I'm in the trifecta. I'm in the sports media technology industry, all male oriented. And I've been able to survive a couple bruises here and there. But there are points in time that people would like to silence you, and you just got to keep going. So I applaud all those people that are here that keep on, charging ahead, and to our male allies that keep on opening the doors and ensuring that not only that we have a seat at the table, but we also feel like we belong.
All right. That was great. I'm Elizabeth O'Brien. I manage our sports and entertainment partnerships at IBM. Actually, out of college, I started out in sports on the production end. So I was a sports photographer. And it was just a great lifestyle. But I sort of felt like I needed to sort of grow up a little bit. And, it's a long story I'll tell another time. But I eventually morphed into marketing and had a career marketing, for years. And I worked for a small consulting firm leading their customer experience practice. And IBM came in and bought us. So that was my sort of introduction to technology was, okay, IBM owns this now, I can do this. Let me figure out what IBM does. Took on a series of marketing roles there and eventually found my way back to sports and entertainment. So it was sort of like these two sort of paths came together. And what we do at IBM in sports and entertainment partnerships is we have, for a company the size of IBM, we have a relatively discrete portfolio, because the way we handle our partnerships is to go deep. So every partnership we have, we create a robust solution that addresses the business objectives of that partner and uses and showcases our technology to do that. So it's much more interesting to talk about, it's an anecdote I always use, but it's much more interesting to talk about, how cloud technology enables a platform to expand capacity when Serena Williams is in a third set tiebreak, in the finals at the US Open. Why is that important than to say, well, our cloud really expands because of people want to blah, 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 just in a business sense. It's really compelling to talk about Serena Williams, and so and at the same time, our partnerships are showcases for how IBM works with businesses of all sizes in industries around the world. So, my job really is kind of soup to nuts, right? To figure out what is the right partnership, what does the partner need, how can we address those needs, what is the right experience that we can give to fans. And how can we engage fans in a conversation about IBM? IBM is a business-to-business company. We don't sell ThinkPads anymore. So, but yet, when all of you leave here today and go out in the world, you will touch IBM without knowing it. And so it's a tough conversation to have with people because, the average person on the street is not a consumer of IBM's products. But IBM is more relevant than they would know. And so sports and entertainment is a really good platform to begin and perpetuate that conversation.
Thank you. So you're actually the back end of the fan experience.
The back end and the front end.
And the
we
front
do
end
both,
too,
yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So just as an example, what would watching a football game?
Well, unless you're talking about fantasy football,
Okay.
Which we have a partnership with
Yeah.
ESPN for fantasy football, that wouldn't be the sport. But I'll go back
Okay.
to the US Open.
Okay.
So when you go to the US Open, honestly, you wouldn't, if you're not sort of sitting on the court, you wouldn't know the score without IBM technology there, right? When you go on the website, when you go on the apps, the number one thing everyone wants is the scores and the videos and the articles and all of that. But there are also other features that use AI to predict, what players will do, what they have to do well in a match, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. So this is a question for all of you. What has been the experience? I mean, you're in this like almost double whammy of challenge, being in sports and technology. And I see there's like a lot of nodding going on.
Smiling.
Yeah, and smiling, and a very knowing smile. Elise, tell us what it's like, and then Sandra, because it looks like you're dying to tell us. So.
Well, I just to give a quick background, growing up, I was a competitive figure skater, that's what all little girls did. I'm dating myself here, but that was the Dorothy Hamill era. I don't know if anybody here remembers her. But when I went to college, the head of the women's ice hockey team came and found me on campus, and he said, I know you're this figure skater, but would you like to play hockey? And I trained on the same ice as the Rangers and the same ice as the Islanders, and they used to come in with broken noses and black and blue eyes the next morning, and I was like, I don't think so. And I called my parents that night. My mother said, no, I like my daughter's facial features, and my father said, are you kidding? This is the opportunity to be part of a team. You've never been part of a team. So I started playing hockey. And I loved it. It was just this. It was a wonderful and fantastic sport I think for women and for young girls, and it was just something that I just loved. And so I got a job at the NHL. I got a job at the San Jose Sharks, helping to launch the Sharks out in California. And that was then the first team of what was known as the modern era of the NHL, because it was in 1990. And that was when Silicon Valley was just becoming Silicon Valley. And I remember when I used to try to figure out, because we had to create what is now known as fan acquisition. Fan acquisition did not exist because you didn't have a marketing department. You had a PR department or you had a corporate sponsorship department. There was no such thing as marketing. So there we are in Northern California. There's 3 ice rinks in a 600-mile radius. There's maybe 300 kids that play ice hockey. What are you going to do? So because I played hockey, I became this ambassador for the sport out in Northern California. And then I was brought to the NHL to do for all the teams what I did for the Sharks. But I remember specifically having a quick conversation with Commissioner Bettman at the time, and I said to him, did you hire me because you think I can do the job, or did you hire me because I could play hockey? And he said, well, both. And I was like, I just want you to know if I never sat on the ice in my life, I'd still be able to do this job. And I want you to understand that when you're hiring women after me, you don't hire them because they can play hockey. You hire them because they can do the job. So that was my experience for the 17 years that I spent at the NHL. It was wonderful, it was terrific, but when I got there, I got the job because I played the game. And I would like to think that I was part of the team that went from 400 million to 2 billion in a few years. But I didn't do that because I could play hockey. I did that because I understood what we needed to do to grow as a league. And I think that, I'd like to think that the opportunities are now there regardless of whether you've ever, played in that game. But there's still that push and pull about, well, if you haven't played, how would you know? That's just not a feasible answer anymore.
Sandra.
I have a two-part story. I'm going to start when I started my career in the tech industry. I'm Mexican American, first generation, and so it's important to understand your upbringing so you understand what has transpired and how you were conditioned. Very fortunate, upper middle class neighborhood. I was the only minority, and what I learned how to do is camouflage very well. So I did everything that I could to be viewed as an American. I would often let go of my last name, Lopez. I'm fair by nature, so people really didn't think I was Mexican. And then I would go to Mexico and visit my family, and they used to call me gringa, and I would try to do everything I possibly can to fit in to be a Mexican. And so that worked really well when I started my career in the tech industry because I had to be one of the guys. For me, I felt like to fit in, okay, wear the suits. I still have these shoes. They're like square toe, clunky, like square heels, very masculine looking. I took up golf because I knew that the deals are done playing golf. I was pretty good, but I was never invited. The females were never invited to play golf. And I did a lot of the happy hours, and I could at that time because I didn't have a family, right? So the 5 o'clock happy hours. And so I did that for I would say, the first half of my career. And this is why I always talk about Intel, the magical company, asked me this question of like, what does it feel like to be a Latina in tech? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've never made my ethnicity an issue. I never made my gender an issue. And that question bothered me so much, like it lasted for 3 months, and I finally realized I was covering, and I was never my true self, and I was literally probably like a walking dead person because I could never feel and bring my true self to work. And then I said to myself, I'm doing a disservice because one, I'm not representing 50% of the population as we're developing technology and think about algorithms, how they're shaping our society. And the Latinos, they love sports, and they're the number one, they tend to buy early adopters of technology. So I went through a 3-year journey of like really figuring out who was I supposed to become, and really lean into, I'm a woman, and I'm a Mexican American person. And I will be very loud and speak my truth in ensuring that diversity and inclusion is represented in every single room. And that came with challenges. I mean, this is the first time I'm talking about it, but like I've been spoken about like the AOC in tech. I have been threatened. I've had to go in hiding because when you speak up, there are those people that want to silence you because they don't want to see the kaleidoscope of individuals that I see in this room in leadership positions. So it's hard. I always tell like the female leaders that are going into any business, it's not going to be easy, but please do not give up because people want us to give up. And so I do this for the next generation. And then when I entered the sports industry, I remember this vividly. I won't name the conference. And I had to do a keynote. I was really nervous because I usually do keynotes in the tech industry. I got used to like the tech industry. There's some females. But this one was different because I looked on stage and it was a sea of men, all white, in blue suits. And I was like, what is going on? And so I'm like, okay, I have to make a statement. And I left and I started to reach out to people in the industry. I'm like, this has to change. Because do you realize that 45% of females like to watch NFL? Do you realize like I'm one of the biggest ambassadors of like doing the Sunday parties within my family, more so than my husband at the time. My daughter, and I was listening to this speech earlier, is like, she wants to see sports. And so you're like not marketing to 50% of the population that wants to see male sports and female sports. And so in that journey, it hasn't been easy in the sports industry. It's hard. And I remember this, I won't name the league. We were doing a deal here in New York City. It was me and my team and my boss. And in that meeting, they were talking to all the men and ignored me. And then I was waiting at the end, and I asked this one, I was very smart, like just ask the most intelligent question that you can. And I did, and everybody's like, well, we didn't think about that. And then at the end, I said, I just hope you realize that I'm the decision maker on this deal. And then they came back and they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, well, it's a little bit too late. And like, that was a character defining moment. We left and I was walking with my boss and my boss is like, did you see what happened? And I go, yeah, I was there. Everybody ignored me. And I said, but did you see that you never had my back? And that needs to change. You noticed and you never said anything. You never brought me into the conversation. And so for that was a learning experience for him. And so I always tell people, like, take those moments to help educate our colleagues. Sometimes it's not done intentional. And, you know, we formulated a really good relationship. And listen, to be fair to these gentlemen, they weren't used to dealing with females doing these deal contracts. And so you also have to be forgiving, and you also have to bring them along the journey. And now they're my good friends. And so I think it's really important that, yes, it's hard and we're all gonna have to fight, but I think there's ways to drive a productive conversation so we move everybody forward, and we should not do the male bashing. We talk about diversity and inclusion. I know I have males that are 50 and older that can't get jobs. We should be considering them for opportunities. And so the journey's not done. It's not over, as Microsoft likes to say, but it takes a village and the collective we to make a difference. And so conferences like this make a difference, and I'm super excited and about SIGA and what you guys are doing.
So in talking about DEI, Elizabeth, you and I were talking a little bit about how algorithms have biases. And it's important to, on the back end to make sure that there is diversity. Can you talk a little bit about that and what IBM, how IBM focuses on
100%.
it?
I think there's been a lot written on it, starting with, there was originally a lot written about visual recognition and AI and visual recognition, and how visual recognition systems were built to reflect the people who had actually built them, which is mostly white men. But it goes beyond just the visual piece. It's, if you think, there's also been a lot written about healthcare, right? And using AI to identify, to diagnose, and again, if you're building an algorithm, you're looking for certain things. And if your sphere of experience is like this, you're looking for all the things in between here and here. You haven't even thought about those things, and it's not malicious. It's not willful. I don't like to think, but so you need to have as diverse a team as possible to, solve the diversity of issues that are out there, right? In healthcare, in visual recognition. But if you're also bringing it back to sports, you're creating a fan experience. Well, to your point, fans come in all shapes and sizes, right? And untapped markets are more diverse than the tap market, right? And so if you're not creating an experience that addresses sort of this whole untapped market, your daughter, you're leaving a lot on the table, right? And so, there is no such thing as, I think we've all learned this in the past decade in this country, but there is no such thing as just pure factual communication. Like, it always gets decoded in one way or another. There is no such thing as pure, unbiased AI, because it's created by people. And so
Machine learning, right?
machine learning,
from something.
AI, any kind of an algorithm is created by people.
Yeah.
And so you need to have as diverse a set of experience creating that algorithm to address your creation is a reflection of your audience, or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
There's a great example, and I want to share it because it kind of provides things in context around algorithms. So imagine, autonomous driving, right? Imagine you're creating an algorithm and you're in the freeway and you have to, as engineers, determine you're about to get into an accident. If you go to the left-hand side, you're going to kill an entire family. If you decide to go off the ledge, you're going to kill your 2 kids in the background, right?
It's not a great choice.
No.
Neither, but the algorithm you have to build. Now think about global cows in Asia. They're sacred. Have you thought about the cows? And that, to me, is the most profound example of why you need such diverse people in the room, because they're value-based. And if you don't have diverse values in the room, you can't have that debate. And so for me, when I heard that example, I was like, wow, what do you do? Is it like your 1 kid in the background, or the family of 5, or the cow?
Yeah. What do you see, Elise, as some of the trends for women in this tech space, sports tech space?
So I actually see it as a great equalizer. I mean, the concept of STEM is something that is available, at least in the US, across almost every school system. So everybody can grow up participating in math and science and learning how to code and the rudiments of technology. So, I mean, it's not 100%, but it's far greater than it was 10 years ago. And so when young girls are encouraged to participate in STEM and are encouraged to understand that if you want to participate in sports, you don't just have to play. You can actually participate from a business standpoint, and you can learn that by participating in learning how to code and other things you learn in school now. That has created a much greater population and, democratization to access. So what we're seeing now, certainly at WIST, because we focus on these things, is a greater percentage of young girls coming out of high school and women coming out of college are coming out with degrees where they can be data scientists, they can be engineers, they understand how to code, they understand that the world operates on technology first. And if they want to apply that in the world of sports and what I call legacy sports, understand that this is a valuable person. They don't just need to play hockey, they need to know how to code, or they need to understand business. And so that has actually leveled the playing field because now it's part of a curriculum. So we see a lot of women going into the tech side, the business technology side, the fan experience side, versus just marketing or just PR or the more formally kind of classic roles that women used to take. And that doesn't exist anymore. It's a much easier, much more even playing field.
So I just think that's such a great point. Context, right? Context is everything. Like, learn this math because you have a test, or learn this math because, it's going to help you figure out who's going to win on Sunday, right? Or learn this math because you're going to be able to share your opinion about whether this is a fair trade or not, right? So I think context is key, and I think that's that and passion, right? And if you can, I think that's why I love the conversation about sports and technology, because they kind of go together. There's so much passion, and there's so much to sports, right? There's so much emotion, there's so much community, and there's so much technology, and there's so much business. It's in a way a reflection of the world.
Absolutely, and there are going to be even more opportunities, especially as we start to build out the metaverse. So I'm going to throw that out now to questions, and it looks like we have one right there.
I wanted to ask Sandra a question. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to mentorship and how you work with younger people in your organization? Because I've been inspired by what I've heard, but I'd love to hear how you bring that to younger people?
It's one of the things that I do with my free time. So what I've decided to do is I have to help the next generation out, and some of it is based on oftentimes females sabotage themselves and do not believe in themselves, and kind of guiding them and mentoring them and saying, sometimes let's just practice. Like, how are you going to ask for that raise? Why? It just happened recently. My chief of staff said, I'm not qualified for this. I'm like, why not? You're doing it already. She's like, oh, well, I don't have this. I go, that is why we are not progressing. And so what I decided to do is, because my hope is like the next generation is going to break the ceiling, and we're going to have a kaleidoscope of C-level and people at the board directors, is once a month I dedicate one day to mentorship inside the company, within my team, and outside. And I always tell people, just work with my admin partner, and I'm here to help you, connecting dots, networking, giving advice, role playing. And I do that because I didn't have that. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have sponsors when I was young. And I had so many situations that happened to me that I wish I had somebody just to talk to. And so I feel like I end up becoming, those are the hardest days, because I end up becoming a therapist. And I'm hearing the stories, and there's some, we have a lot of work to do. But that's my way of giving back. And I do believe I was given, for whatever reason, an amazing platform, whether it was Microsoft or Intel, to help drive progress. And so I will do so as much as I can. And I also mentor young generation males. I try to make sure that I'm inclusive, because I want them to also learn of what's happening and the micro injustices that happen. So that's how I do it. I just do it out of passion.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh.
Thanks so much for speaking. I guess I'm curious to hear your take on sports and technology at the intersection of NFT, as cryptocurrency is changing the world right now.
So I will be the first person to tell you that I know this much. Most people know this much, okay? The world of NFTs, cryptocurrencies, Web 3.0 is just beginning. And I'm reticent to make a declaration about where we're going or what we're doing. I do believe that, NFTs, those were baked years ago. You're just hearing about them now, okay? People are being educated about them now. The NBA and teams and leagues are participating in them now. That's the first of what will become a much broader engagement. That engagement is really people discovering, technologies discovering what you can't do on Web 2.0 that you can do on Web 3.0. And I don't believe that we are anywhere close to being able to understand what that gap is, but it has started, and it will continue to grow. Just like, we went from creating websites to then social to what is now NFTs. It's going to continue to grow. It will be an absolute critical part of new forms of ROI for sports platforms, for consumers, for engagement, for democratization of access, and for generating new revenues. But we don't know, well, I certainly don't know what that will look like in 2 to 5 years. It will be something that nobody in this room has thought about yet, but it will be there.
I have a lot of really boring and practical questions about NFTs, like about rights issues. That is the thing that just comes to me. I see these NFTs out there, and some of them are from fans, but a lot of them are from people who very clearly don't have the rights to the things that are contained within these NFTs. And I wonder, you mentioned media. I just wonder, how it's going to change the universe of rights holders, right? So a league and teams and players and, college players now, own their name and likeness. I think boy, if I was, if I was in law school, I would probably be focused on NFTs and IP right now.
Yep. The business models will have to change, otherwise they're going to be left behind, because you know what? The next generation, NFT, cryptocurrencies, Web 3.0, it's all happening. So I think it's one of those, I highly suggest start following it, learning about it. We got caught off guard in the digital world. We got caught off guard in mobility. Let's learn from history, and let's start to learn and make sure that we're informing and we're doing what's right for society and culture.
Okay. I think we're out of time. So Elise, Sandra, Elizabeth, thank you so much. This was
you.
truly inspiring. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Really great.